Good evening, and I'm very happy to be here. I am Dr. Monica Bickerstaff Riley. I am the total embodiment of my North Stars. And what do I mean by that? I am an Emmy Award winning journalist, a lifetime member of the NABJ. I'm a doctor of integrative medicine. I'm a college professor, and my heart's passion is with my company, celebrating 10 years of Dr. Monica's Natural Beauty.
Thank you so very much for being all of those things. And it fits perfectly with the theme for this oral history project and a companion exhibition that will open on the first evening of the NABJ convention in downtown Cleveland. And this is a title that my colleague Stacy Brisker came up with. It's with a dash of flair, with a dash of flair. So we're very pleased then to be working with Cleveland Public Library's Special Collections Department on both the project for the oral history and the exhibition. So can you tell me, please, how long you have worked first as a journalist and then as an academician and then all of the other wonderful things that you shared in your opening statement?
Okay, well, first I am a Cleveland native. I was born in Cleveland, but I was raised in New York and subsequently received my bachelor's in English and Africana Studies from Vassar College in New York. And then I skipped on over to get a master's of science in journalism from the Medill School of Journalism at Northwestern. And then recently, in this chapter of my life, 6 years ago, I received my medical degree from the University of Arizona School of Integrative Medicine. So, all of those things begin with me as a little girl, um, totally being guided and loved on and spirit filled by my parents and my grandparents with my little stuffed animals and my dolls. I knew from probably a little girl that I wanted to be a veterinarian and then I wanted to be a doctor. And so my dolls always had band-aids and bandages on them, and stuffed animals were getting broken legs all the time and broken arms. But and when I got to Vassar, I declared my major as a freshman pre-med. However, as the dream was a bit deferred but not denied by a specific college professor that I had in psychology, I switched up, and that was the first time I made that shift in my life. And I decided that I wanted to major in English, double major in English and Africana Studies. But at that time, I had no idea what I was going to do with that, right? My dad would constantly say, what are you going to do with that? My nana's, how are you going to make money with that? My mom, who is a professor emeritus of Vassar College, she was the one who knew that regardless of whatever I decided to major in, I was going to make it do what it do and make it work for me.
Mhm.
So she's always been in my corner, and I decided after I graduated that I wanted to go into journalism. I knew that news was very important to me. I was inspired by the Max Robinsons um, at the time and the Sue Simmons. And if you grew up in New York, y'all know who Sue Simmons is. Um, Charlene Hunter Galt was one of my inspos. So I knew I wanted to be a journalist, but I just didn't know how to be a journalist. I applied to Columbia Journalism School, which at the time was a good journalism school for print. But I wanted to be on TV, so I knew I had that flair too. Um, so I did my research and saw that the Medill School of Journalism at Northwestern University in Chicago offered an intensive program where literally they had radio and TV. Hello, that's up my alley. But I was going to be immersed for a year working as a real journalist. Um, I smile with the memories because I think that was the time in Chicago when I first met Oprah Winfrey. she attended my church. And she was really big. She was just getting started between Chicago and Baltimore. And, all of these other, the history in Chicago, the Black history in particular in Chicago, was an inspiration. It was wonderful because I could create my own stories. Of course, I had an editor, but I could create my own stories and go out with my own crew and cover my stories. I wanted to focus on the culture. I wanted to focus on the community. Um, and that's what I did for the most part. I also wanted to cover a medical beat. So when my editor assigned me to different hospitals on the west side and the north side, I said, okay, uh, that's kind of when I got a little inspired again to think about medicine, but it wasn't occupying my mind. Um, when I left the Medill School, left immediately with a job lined up in Washington, D.C. on Capitol Hill. And that was with an NBC affiliate. So I literally was covering Capitol Hill news um, in the area of education. So, it's interesting, Regina, because I have in my family, my three North Stars are my mom and my two Nanas. My mother is an educator. My paternal Nana was in healing, natural healing. There's a legacy of natural healing in my family that goes back 100 years. And then my
Mhm.
maternal Nana was into the arts and education. So the three of them were like, you do what you want to do, we've got you, basically. Um,
Mhm.
I started out covering the news on Capitol Hill, and literally within 3 months' time, I was burned out, kind of beat down, kind of deflated. It wasn't as luxurious as I thought, as glamorous as I thought. Um, those who start out as reporters or who are reporters, much respect. We do the most work, get paid the least, but it's really the anchors that get the most accolades, right? So, reporting wasn't going to work for me. I had to wear a beeper, and at certain times of the day or night, regardless of what I was doing, if that beeper went off, they expected me to show up on the scene covering a story. And I didn't like that. So I said, okay, what is it that would make me happy still in television, but making more money, have a little bit more autonomy, working with our people in the community, and also doing something with respect to programming? So I applied for and was hired at WHMM Channel 32, at the time, the public broadcasting affiliate owned by Howard University. Check, 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 right? Right up the alley. And I was working in the programming department, which meant that um, I was working and making programming decisions of what was going to be aired or broadcast on that channel. Super young. The man who hired me had so much faith in me, and I learned so much from him. And
Mhm.
when he decided to leave his position as vice president of programming, he um, recommended that I get that position or be promoted into that position. And I was only 22 years old, so I'm working in this field of broadcasting at the age of 22, 23, and I have all of these other veteran broadcasters around me, and they're looking at me like, "What is she doing here?" Right? And
Mhm.
I'm looking at them like, "What can I learn from you?" So it was a rocky road in the beginning. But when they
Mhm.
saw that I was serious and that I wanted to kind of change the tone of that channel, which was heavy um, programming that you could get from PBS Network. So, like Sesame Street and so forth. Well, that's great. Let's keep that. But we have a whole production unit. Let's start producing our own local programs. Goodness, we live in Washington, D.C. There's news around the corner every day.
Mhm.
And then I met one of my mentors um, who introduced me to how to negotiate contracts to acquire programming from outside sources. So that was what my first chapter as a journalist. I won both of my Emmy awards in documentary production with my crew, with the unit at WHMM, and then moved from there back to New York, working for the Children's Television Workshop and Sesame Street.
My goodness. So you're off and running at 22, which is
Yes.
amazing. From one world-class city to another. I'm comfortable saying that about the federal city, the nation's capital. But this is your story. Would you describe what the Washington, D.C. that you experienced at 22, 23 as being a world-class city?
I absolutely would. It was very exciting to me because that literally was the first time that I was grown up living on my own, living in my own apartment, paying rent, and so forth and so on, and making my way in the at the time was known as the chocolate capital, but Washington has always been and always will be the capital city.
Mhm.
There's so much to Washington, DC, that's great. And even now, there's so much to Washington, DC in the neighborhoods, in the culture. There is a whole generation, a whole legacy of Black owned businesses in Washington, DC. Um, Black owned broadcasting networks, not just television, but also radio that coexist in Washington, D.C. Entrepreneurs who are legacy entrepreneurs, restaurateurs who are legacy restaurateurs. The culture of Washington, D.C. is and will forever be colorful and in living color. And so, yes, it was and still is a wonderful the capital city. But there's nothing like New York. Now, look, when I got to New York City, I was living and working in Manhattan, the Big Apple, and that too was an experience because growing up, I was raised in Poughkeepsie, New York, which is like 90 minutes north of Manhattan. So jumping off of Washington, D.C. and going into Manhattan, that was a whole nother experience too. But it's something that I will never ever forget. New York is my bloodline. um, Cleveland is my root, but New York is my bloodline. And I will never forget my time in New York. Um, I was working for PBS affiliates WLIW and Channel 13. I was also working for a programming and film acquisition company called the Program Resources Group. And then I would also take on side jobs with, for example, Black Side Production Company based in Massachusetts. Um, what else? Oh, HBO. HBO was just getting off the ground. CBS in CBS News in New York City. So New York was great. Still is. Look, New York is the bestest city ever. And I before we move forward, I can't be remiss and not share with you where I'm speaking to you all from this evening. I currently am a resident of Las Vegas, Nevada. Now, who would have thunk that?
Thank you so much for sharing that information on the record. Again, we voluntarily admitted that this is a Zoom recording. It's going to be absolutely beautiful when our videographer frames it so nicely. But you'll be the judge of that when we get it to you, so you can make the final decision, and then give us your permission to share it with the world. Now, you spoke so highly of your family and some of the questions they had for you in the early part of your life. But you talked especially about your grandmothers and your mother uh, being in your corner, having certain gifts that they shared with you. Would you mind sharing their names on the record and telling us a little bit, perhaps, about your mother's work at Vassar and then your choice to pursue your education there as well?
Sure. So I'm super proud of them. Um, my paternal, I'll start with the oldest and then the youngest, get to the youngest. So my paternal nana was Lottie Elizabeth Treadwell, who lived to be 102, and her mantra was, a woman should never, regardless of what age or stage of life she's in, sacrifice her vim, vigor, or vitality. That mantra of hers is the current ethos of my company, Dr. Monica's Natural Beauty. And then my maternal nana, Ethel Davis Bickerstaff, who just transitioned at the age of 105, 5 months ago. Um, she was the one who introduced me to everything beautiful and culture. She instilled in me that regardless of who you present yourself to or whatever room you walk into, always put your best face forward, always put your best foot forward. If you're tired, before you enter that space, pray. She was and is my faith, my faith beacon. Um, and the family's nucleus, so to speak. Now, the interesting thing about both of my nanas, which is my inspiration, is that they both lived well into their hundreds. Neither one of them were on any prescribed medications. They were living with no mobility issues, maybe a twinge of arthritis here and there, and they had their full cognitive. So, from a young child, they instilled in me how important it was and is to take care of myself. Because this body that God has blessed me with, this vessel, is not just for me, it's to serve others. And I cannot serve others if I am not well. So both of them instilled in me rituals and prayers and affirmations on literally how to take care of myself from the time I wake up until the time I go to sleep, how to best care for others, always putting God first with faith as my foundation. And that's what I've done. My mom, so I'm like my mom's like mini me, her pocket pal. And I say that chuckling because when my mom went to Champaign-Urbana to pursue her PhD, of course, she took me with her. I was right there. And then when she received the prestigious honor of appointment at Vassar College, one of the youngest professors, but also the first Black woman professor, first Black American period in the education department. So that's my mom. And it's so funny because from a young child, she would say to me, you know, Monica, you have such a command over yourself at such a young age. People like to listen to your stories. They you like people. You should be a teacher. You should think about teaching. Here I am. Oh no, I'm going to be a journalist. I'm not going to be a teacher. And Regina, one of the things I've learned is you never say what you're not going to do
Mhm.
because I am now an adjunct professor and co-founder of the Sankofa English Initiative at the College of Southern Nevada. And I have been an adjunct for 16 years. So you never say what you're not going to do because you never know.
Mhm. Okay. Well, this is wonderful. Thank you so very much. And yeah, it's quite an interesting journey, it seems to me, that you've had as someone who is now teaching, but learned so much along the way. So, can you tell me, please, how long you lived in Illinois with your mom? You said when she was pursuing her doctorate, and just exactly where the journey took you. We talk about the Great Migration a lot when we do these oral history interviews. And usually we're focusing on people who moved from the South to the North between about 1915 and certainly through the World War II era and beyond. But if you could tell us, please, because I know you weren't around World War One and World War II, but in your lifetime, tell me, please, about the cities that you've seen or the communities that you grew up in while both you and your mother were studying.
Well, I was only 2.5 when my mom pursued her doctorate. So I don't remember too much of Illinois except for my Montessori school and my first real human friends. We were probably there for about maybe 3 years, 3 or 4 years. And during that time, my mom's sister friends, these were other Black women who were there, often with one or two children, many of them single moms with one or two children who were also pursuing advanced degrees. And so it was interesting. They were coming from everywhere from New Orleans, from Philadelphia, all congregating with the common shared space and enterprise. These were the trailblazers.
Mhm.
Um, Yes, we do talk about the Great Migration. In my family, having uh, the men in my family literally serving this country from World War I, World War II, and through. So our migration is literally from Kentucky, Missouri, through Cleveland, Illinois, and for me, my migration, I'd say starts from Illinois up to New York, Washington, D.C., Atlanta, Georgia, New York, um, back and now currently in the Southwest. But my root, my focal point is always Cleveland, and that's because the majority of my family, my grandparents and my father, stayed in Cleveland. They remained in Cleveland. So I'm always in Cleveland. In fact, I'll be there next month. But um, I say that the Great Migration is significant to my evolution and my ethos because at the College of Southern Nevada, I teach the Harlem Renaissance literature and composition. And so the inspiration behind the drive and the dedication of the Great Migration, I see that in myself, but all I'm doing is filling in the footsteps by my nanas and my mom. So so both of my nanas are still with me in spirit. My mom is still here full and living color, and she's still my greatest cheerleader. Um Yeah, I came full circle into education, but I also came full circle into healing.
Okay.
There was a part of me that still was never satisfied, first of all, from that college professor telling me what I could not do or should not become, meaning becoming a doctor, right?
Hmm.
There was that part of me that was still kind of ticked off. But there's also the part of me, entrepreneurship, owning businesses. Now that runs in my dad's bloodline. And so the combination of now owning my own company going into 10 years, which is a feat in and of itself. Uh, Most businesses started by Black women don't make it past 2 years. So to be in this beauty space for 10 years, I'm so grateful and so blessed. Um, Bringing in the healing traditions and the fragrance traditions that were instilled in me and taught to me by both of my nanas from the time I was 4 years old, and creating a very successful company. And then bridging that with the passion of sharing with young minds. Uh, and most of my students are Black and Brown students, that they can be whatever they want to be, and don't ever let anyone deter you from what your natural path is. So my class is kind of like an integrative class. It's yeah, literature, which is my passion. The Harlem Renaissance is my passion. But it's also, we start out each class with affirmations. You know, it's also affirming themselves, instilling in them the belief that they can do whatever they want to do, major in whatever they want to be. Public speaking, that was taught to me by one of my nanas. When you walk into a room, that is your first impression. You only get one shot when you walk into a room. So I teach my students that public speaking, how you should conduct yourself in other spaces. Um, and those are the cities I've traveled outside of the United States. So I've traveled to Africa. I've been to Zambia. I've been to Zimbabwe, London, Paris. The transitional time was the time that I spent, the 6 weeks that I spent in Zambia. That was another shift that I made in my life. And the determination to finally decide that I was going to go back and get that medical degree, but I was going to do it on my own terms. I was going to do it in the field of integrative medicine, which is marrying the Eastern medicine with Western medicine. And it didn't matter how old I was or what I was doing, I was going to do it, and I did. So I received my doctor degree in 2016.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. I'm going to get back to thank you for indulging me and answering these questions that were not on the list. But it seems to me that you have lived a wonderful life up until this point, and that you continue to do great things that certainly make folks in Cleveland very proud of you. But I want to ask also, before I get too far into the list, if you wouldn't mind stating your dad's name for the record. I think we got the grandmothers and also your mother, Dr. Bickerstaff, but also would like to hear your father's name, please.
Yes. Oh my goodness. So my dad is the late Robert Lewis Riley, and my two grandfathers are the late Carlos Treadwell and the late John Bickerstaff.
And so, may I ask, Dr. Riley, are you the family genealogist, or how would you describe the work that you do? You have all of this detailed information, certainly about three generations of the members of your family. But would you consider yourself to be also a genealogist and a journalist?
Yes, yes, ma'am. And I developed that skill. I had no choice. My dad's mom, my paternal nana, she knew even the family that my dad married into, which was the Bickerstaff family. My nana Lottie knew everybody's uh, family lineage, at least going back 3 generations. And I just remember all the time sitting down with her every holiday, every time I was with her. And at the time, I was young. It seemed to be burdensome. Like, why is she telling me all this? But she would sit down and constantly repeat not only my lineage, my ancestry, going back 3 or 4 generations, but also my mama's, the Bickerstaffs, going
Yeah.
back 2 or 3 generations. And so my mom is an historian, um, and a genealogy expert. And so I will never forget Dr. Henry Louis Gates Jr. When he premiered Finding Your Roots on PBS. I was still in New York City working at PBS, and we had a premiere launch party for him where all of us on the staff received a DNA kit. This was back in the mid 2000s. So that means that all of this other genealogy stuff didn't exist then. We received the first genealogy kits that were created by a professor and scientist at the University of Ohio, specifically for humans of African ancestry. So right now, AfricanAncestry.com is what this was. And I grew just immersed even more into my family history and my family genealogy after taking that DNA and finding out what we were, how we mapped out. um, so, yes, I would say that now I have the privilege of having some wisdom on my years and being able to share this genealogy and our family history with the youngins coming up.
Well, thank you so much again for both the journey, city by city and nation by nation and culture by culture on both sides of the family. It's wonderful. And thanks also for the different kind of journey that I think comes through that DNA analysis and the technology changing and teaching us more of the science and the humanities working together. Seems like it was tailor made for you, given your career path, with the Africana studies and also with the medicine. So thank you for sharing that. And we're almost 3/4 of a way through our list here. So thank you so much for that. But can you tell us a little bit more about PBS? I know it's the subject of a lot of debates, um, both during the most recent presidential election and then soon after. President Trump started to talk about some changes that he wanted to make in the media world. But again, your thoughts on the value, if you will, of public broadcasting in the American experience, if you wouldn't mind sharing those thoughts.
Um, I, I have a very I have a 30-year history with PBS. Not only as a child, I remember watching and being educated by Sesame Street and the Electric Company and Ghost Writers and Zoom. PBS was my constant companion, and it covered all of my learning curves. So from Montessori school to elementary school, middle school, and then high school. And there is 2/3 of our population now, children who have been taught ABCs, one, two, threes, how to read, science, Bill Nye the Science Guy, um, by PBS programming. So, in my mind and my fight is not to see PBS destroyed. I think that it's foolish in a time such as now, where we really need to be focused on educating our children, heck, educating our adults, because as I see it, and it's unfortunate that there are many adults walking around that, what was that show? Are you smarter than a fifth grader? I would say no. And that's not being an elitist or being a snobist, but nowadays, most people don't take the time to read. They don't go to their libraries. They don't read their newspapers. They don't listen to reliable news sources. They don't watch documentaries on television. So they don't know. And as an adult, just because you don't know, you don't have the right to prevent your children from learning. And in this here United States, this country where the men in my family have sacrificed and fought for over 100 years, as Black Americans in this United States, our history is American history. And through PBS, through NPR, through organizations like the National Association of Black Journalists, again, of which I am a proud lifetime member, heck, through journalism, proper journalism. This is where all of our stories are told, because all of our stories make up this nation, and all of these stories are important. All of our histories are important. So I believe that PBS should remain untouched. And I believe that if anyone who is watching or listening has the ability to stand up for and speak out for PBS, I strongly recommend that you do. Um, when I was working for the Program Resources Group, the acquisitions network that I shared about earlier, and also when I was working for PBS affiliates, not only WHMM in Washington, D.C., but also WLIW and Channel 13 in New York City, I was also working with uh, filmmakers and producers from other countries. My world expanded. My desire to travel expanded from working with these filmmakers and working with these other producers from other countries who would come and say, listen, they would pitch to me, this is our documentary series. Are you interested in broadcasting it on your network? Well, let me watch it. And a lot of people cannot travel or choose not to, but you can visit anywhere, any land on any PBS affiliate in this country. So there's no excuse to not know.
All right, thank you. Yeah, there was something you just said that reminded me of a song from a Broadway musical, Ragtime. And same thing happened in an interview yesterday, where there are lyrics that suggest your sword. And the reference to the sword was there because there was a previous verse that said, I did not put down my sword when justice was my right. And this is what you say to those who blame us for the way we chose to fight, that we didn't put down our swords. And you use the word fight. Is it that much of a challenge, to champion public television or public radio in this historical moment?
I think that I think that we will always fight. um, I think that the definition of fight and how we choose to fight changes from generation to generation. I was born on the precipice of the civil rights movement and the women's rights movement and the cultural shift I call it the second great migration, cultural shift of this nation. But looking back, my parents fought differently. My fight is different. And I see Gen Y and Gen Z doing different things. But I believe that when you believe in something and when you know what your purpose is, it's really not a fight where there is a finish line. And let me clarify what I mean by that. When you walk in your purpose, that's your purpose. That's what you're on earth to do. So whether it is educate or heal or politicize or whatever your purpose is, um, you must stand in that purpose. I don't believe that someone can come on the scene and experience what we're experiencing now in this country with trying to erase certain people's histories. That's not purpose. How do we overcome that? Lest we forget, we have to keep reminding people who don't look like us or who don't share a shared experience that we are, Black Americans in this country, are the cornerstone of this country. So my fight, my sword is books. My sword is healing because you can't be a soldier in your army or a leader in the army if you're not well. So that's how I blend everything, Regina, through a path of healing to wellness and mental mastery and a path to knowledge through the written history of our histories and quality programming like what you can catch on PBS and other documentaries. Those are very important. Those need to be archived. The special collections in all of our libraries are so important right now because they house the histories of not only the cities that we live in, but also the histories of our nation are housed in our libraries. So the work that you're doing, thank you. Um, the historical work that you're doing, I thank you because that's so important, and we can't stop doing that.
May I ask a question, please, about the First Amendment? If you wouldn't mind answering that, because I've heard a lot of discussion among journalists, and I'm an associate member of the Greater Cleveland Association of Black Journalists. So I don't get to vote on a lot of these issues, but I can listen to the debate and learn from that, from the full-time journalist. But this idea of artificial intelligence being able to do the work that journalists have been doing for Black Americans, especially in the independent Black press, since the 1800s, the early 1800s. And so I'm thinking about Freedom's Journal now. But again, are you concerned about artificial intelligence changing the nature of work that journalists do and how they exercise their rights, First Amendment rights, and how we continue to champion the importance of the freedom of the press and the power of the pen, which is now a digital pen, but the power of the pen and what it can do in this moment in the 21st century. So again, if you would like to share your thoughts on AI and journalism and perhaps the ongoing significance of First Amendment rights.
So absolutely. So there is no Constitution without the First Amendment, which is why it's the First Amendment and why it's number one. Okay, freedom of speech, freedom of the press, freedom of expression. That is one of our birthrights. And as a journalist, we take an oath to uphold the truth by any means necessary. And I'm paraphrasing, but that's basically what it is. So we too take an oath. And so my desire to become a journalist literally is built on the backs of real journalists back in the day, the Barbara Walters, the um, uh, Dan Rathers, again, the Max Robinsons, Ida B. Wells Barnett, you know, she's one of my sheroes. Phyllis Wheatley, Paul Laurence Dunbar. These are all ancestors of our past, but also ancestors who have a vested history in the press. I am not an advocate of AI, period. It's funny because I constantly have this debate with my uh, collegiate colleagues, especially since I teach writing, since I teach composition. But with respect to journalism, I am horrified now by this young generation of journalists. They're not journalists. You know, they can call themselves bloggers, but they're not journalists because journalists, behind every journalist's pen is the ability to research and the ability to interview. It's the ability to interface with human beings and tell their stories as they tell them, not as you interpret them, but as they tell them. To research the facts that are a foundation, cornerstone of this nation. And AI obliterates all of that. I always tell my students, first of all, don't step in my class and turn in a paper that's written in Chat GPT or using AI because I will know the difference. How? From the first night when my students come into my class, I have them come to the front, tell us all a little bit about themselves, and they start writing that very first night. That's so I can read and hear their writer's voice. And if I need to do a little bit more research, it's all about the research. That's where the power of the pen comes from. Knowledge is power, reading is power, writing is power. And you can't take that away from us no matter how other factions, other entities that are not part of this American history, no matter how they try. I am agitated by AI when, in fact, if I'm showing up to a business meeting and the only thing I have to go on now is someone's electronic CV, and they don't have a real photograph there. You've seen them. They have maybe an AI generated image, and I get to the spot for the interview, or if I'm doing something like this, public speaking or interviewing on Zoom or whatever, and the person who shows up doesn't match their artificial intelligentized image, I I don't continue with the project. I don't do the interview. I apologize. I tell them why, and that's that.
Mhm.
AI is artificial, artificial intelligence. And that's kind of like an oxymoron because, in my opinion, you can't have both in one sentence. But since we do, um, the power of the First Amendment is as important now as it was in 1776. The power of the First Amendment, freedom of speech, and freedom to write and communicate is as important now as it was when our first ancestors set foot in this country in 1619. So, what we see now that's being sanitized and generated as quote unquote news is not news. I can call it something else. I can use that coin phrase, fake news. But the majority, to me, if you're a journalist and you're not educated in a journalism school, and you're working as a journalist or you're working in news, you're not fulfilling your purpose, and you are doing a lot of harm to the First Amendment if you haven't been, because we journalists, we're trained, we are raised, and it's not for everyone. And I feel like if you don't go through that proper process, then you can't really call yourself a journalist. It's like as a surgeon, if you're a cardiac surgeon and you did not do your residency in cardiology and you're talking about, I'm getting ready to operate on your heart, I don't think so.
All right, thank you. Dr. Bickerstaff Riley, you mentioned earlier that Ida B. Wells Barnett is one of your sheroes, and and I love what she was writing after Reconstruction. A tough young woman, but again finds her voice. Iola, I believe was her pen name for a
Yes.
column that was very popular in Black newspapers. But again, what is it for you? And that's for me as the student of history and someone who's been teaching history for more than a quarter of a century. What she did with that power of the pen and risk her life for telling the truth, run out of town, but finally resettled in Chicago and did great things there. But what was it for you that drew you to the life story of Ida B. Wells and keeps you there? My goodness, almost, I think about 90 years since her transition. But to say that she is, not that she was, but that she is one of your sheroes.
Yes, and today is her birthday. So she's one of my sheroes because she her integrity with respect to her writing, but also her fearlessness. I will say her fearlessness and her ability to be a chameleon in spaces where she should not have been when she was writing specifically about anti-lynching in this country. And the fact that she didn't care, that she would walk up into any space and look into any face and ask any question. That's her fearlessness, her faith, her foundation of faith. And then I feel her sacrifice, because she was married and she had 5 children. I believe that many. And so, still, as you just mentioned, to travel to different cities where most of the time she had to travel incognito and undercover because of the work she was doing. She was exposing the faction of white supremacy in this country in the 1920s and the early 1930s that was leading to what we now know as lynching. And if they, yeah, she was run out of many cities, right? Run out of many towns, but that didn't stop her from going to the next one. And that did not stop her from printing the truth. I feel like for me, um, Ms. Ida B held up a mirror for me. I feel like my writing and my journalism, and regardless of what awards I've won, they are to hold up a mirror to society, not only to, extol the accolades of all the wonderful things that we do as a greater good, blah, 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 but also the ugly parts that need to change, the ugly parts in humans that need to change, the hatred that needs to be sucked out like a vacuum of so many people, basically because they don't understand and they don't take the time to understand someone or a culture that looks different. I feel like Ms. Ida B, she was all of that. She went into, again, all of these spaces and looked into all of these faces, and because not only was she a comely woman, but she was a smart woman, and she had the gift of conversation. Oftentimes, I feel like a lot of her subjects overlooked how dangerous she was with that pen, because they looked at her and they said, "Oh, she's beautiful, she's well spoken, she's articulate for a Negro." But little did they know, until a day later or 48 hours later, when her stories of truth would hit the front pages of those newspapers. And that was the mirror that they had to be accountable to. So I love her.
Thank you. And please forgive me for this commercial for Ida B. Wells, A Red Record. I think it's what is it? Statistical, I can say statistical study of lynching in America, but in 1890s.
Oh,
And case by case, she's proving that all of these charges, are trumped up, that men, especially Black men, and sometimes women, losing their lives because of mob rule in America, the land of the free and the home of the brave. Ida B. Wells was quite an amazing person. But again, I'm editorializing. We can take that out in this digital age because we very much want people to hear your voice. Um, Dr. Bickerstaff Riley, you do so many things. When you talk about the medicine, it's a marriage between the East and the West. And then you have the journalism, and that's been going on for a significant part of your life. And you have the teaching for 16 years. And now, the learning is a little different because AI is there tempting people maybe to take the easy way out instead of putting in the time to do the reading. And then the difficult and challenging, but I think very rewarding work associated with great writing. How do you find time to do all this? It's what I'd like to say. Do you teach every semester? Is that occasional? How do you find time to do your own writing if you're doing the teaching as well?
yeah, so I do. I teach every semester. And do you know that one of my, my final for my um, Harlem Renaissance 102 is for my students to write a 25-page thesis. So I'm not playing around with the knowledge and the history here, and the writing as well. And I walk them through each stage. I mentioned that I'm now an author. I just completed a chapter in an anthology on reclaiming our joy. And my chapter happens to be on legacy, where I tell the story of my two nanas and my mom, because it's my two nanas who worked at Mount Sinai Hospital in the 1950s. Yeah, in the 1950s, early 60s. Um, who met. One had a daughter, one had a son, and they decided that they were going to create this arranged marriage of my mom and my dad, which they and did. But the history of Cleveland's history is instilled in me through my grandparents, because they're the ones who were rooted in Cleveland in the 1930s, 40s, and 50s. After World War II, it was on the GI Bill that my maternal grandparents purchased their first home in Cleveland, in the Glenville area. Um, and so forth and so on. And then my paternal parents purchased my parents' first home in the Lee Harvard area. So it's like, rooted in the history of Cleveland. And when I teach about Langston Hughes, so many people leave out his Ohio and his Cleveland roots, but I always throw that in there. But writing for me, up until this point with this anthology has been articles and my affiliation with newspapers and magazines and writing articles. I've found that's easiest for me juggling my business and my teaching schedule. Um, this past semester, when I began the anthology project in January, I was just starting to teach the spring semester. And so that was indeed a juggle. I don't know how I did it, except for to say I don't remember sleeping for the first 4 months of 2025. Um, but I also enjoyed weaving the tale of me writing and my deadlines and sharing that with my students. My students kept me on task. They were my inspiration to complete, and I was just writing one chapter. They were my inspiration to complete this chapter because being transparent with them and saying, look, it might take me a little longer to get your paper back to you, but it's coming. But I also have to work on my chapter. Oh, that's all right, Professor Riley. What are you doing? And then in class, before we would start class, okay, Professor Riley, did you meet your last deadline? And I'm like, yeah. um, so I find with me, transparency is key when I'm working with my students. First of all, most of them are I teach in the evenings, so that's how I can get everything in. So I teach in the evenings, and so that means that the demographic is a little older. So they're coming in with their life, right? Life be life in with my students. And when I say to them, look, y'all, this is what I'm working on, what do you think? Or, how do you think I should phrase this? In alignment with their writing assignments, I find that everything just kind of works out.
Well, thank you for, again, being that master teacher and a master journalist too, for life. But we're coming to the end of our time together. Most of the interviews have been about 30 minutes long. But when I
Oh, wow.
all the things that you were doing, I wanted people to be able to hear you telling your own story. I
Thank you.
love the look of the interviews, the videographer. I'm sorry, Zoom can't really do what the videographer at the library does. So maybe we'll have a chance to meet someday in Cleveland and sit in
Yes.
front of one of those cameras, one or two of those cameras, where she gets all these amazing angles too. But she's really gifted. I'd like to mention her name, and that's Miss Catherine Young at Cleveland
Yes.
Library. And so she's going to do the editing. And again, as so it flows, and it does flow when you speak. She's going to take a lot of my questioning out. Perhaps that part where I'm stuttering when I'm trying to say statistical study of lynching in America, and by the numbers, represent each one of those numbers representing a Black life that's lost and important. It mattered to Ida B. Wells that people were being slaughtered by mobs in America. And so it's a very painful and bloody kind of work that she's doing. And again, I need to slow down and say it right.
But you know what? I feel like when we meet in Cleveland, we can do a whole nother vlog, a video chapter on Ms. Wells, because what you just said something that is so important to remember. Uh, each one of those lives mattered, and each one of those lives were lost. And you know what? That means that there is a family bloodline that was destroyed, disrupted, and interrupted with each lynching, because for the most part, yes, it was our Black men who were lynched, which means that there then becomes an interrupted family line in the genealogy chart. And, that's just a whole nother point of reference of aggravation. But, as a people, we have survived and come through so much, and we are so resilient and we're so powerful. And my job and my purpose before I leave this earth is to make sure that every single person that I come in contact with understands how powerful we are, whether they are Black Americans or whatever culture they are. They need to understand how powerful we are and that we are, period.
Well, thank you again. I believe I heard you say that you're going to be in Cleveland in August. Is that for the
Yes,
convention? You'll be here for the convention?
I won't be able to be there for the convention. I think that it's so crazy. I think that I'm coming like a day or two after the convention,
Okay.
but I will be there for a week, and I would love to meet you in person
Oh,
and
that would
sit
be great.
down somewhere and continue our conversation.
Yes, perhaps with that genius librarian, Stacy Brisker,
There
who's
you go.
visionary.
Absolutely.
Yeah, she knows the most amazing creatives, photographers, photojournalists, broadcast journalists, scholars, academicians, genealogists, but she brought us all together on this one
Yes.
project with a dash of flair. I love the
Yes.
so it's going to be wonderful. The exhibition will be available beyond the week or so that the journalists will spend in downtown Cleveland. They'll be here. The opening mixer scheduled for Tuesday, August 5th.
Okay.
Convention is over on the 10th of August. We
Oh,
expect that the exhibition will be available for at least a month there at Cleveland Public Library. So I hope that you'll be in town while it is available to the public.
yeah, you know what? I didn't know the convention was lasting that long. I will be there for the tail end.
Oh,
I plan to be there anytime landing between my mom, because my mom is now retired out here in Las Vegas. We plan to get there anytime between the 5th and the 7th of August.
wonderful.
So
Yes, looking
I'm
forward.
very excited. And I'm
Yeah.
excited for Cleveland too. It's time.
Yes. Well, again, thank you so much for your generosity as far as your time is concerned. I really do appreciate it. We'll get the links. Again, Catherine, the videographer, is going to upload the interview footage to their
Okay.
YouTube channel. It'll be private. You'll have a chance to see it. And again, we do need to get the signed release from you before we can share the entire interview with the minor
Okay.
edits with the patrons of the library and other readers and viewers, because we'll have again captions. She does a beautiful job, so I hope that you'll be pleased with
Yes.
all of your PBS experience. Catherine is someone who worked with. She came back home with Spike Lee, 40 Acres and a Mule.
Oh,
Yeah, so she's filmmaker, photographer, videographer. Yeah, but
outstanding.
yeah, I know she would love to meet you. So I hope the two of you have a chance to meet when you come here.
Absolutely outstanding. This is such an important project, Regina. Thank you, thank you, thank you for all of your dedication as well. You
Yeah.
know, these oral histories, that's all we've got.
Um, yeah, I don't know that there's anything more powerful than a first person narrative when people speak the truth
That's
and they
right.
come to know it. And it's interesting with oral history, people don't always describe things exactly as they happen, but it's
Yes.
because our memories change over time,
Yes.
right? Especially when we're over 40.
Yes.
And you're the doctor, you know this, you can teach this class.
Yes.
But we change over time. But I love this one book that I read when I went to the Oral History Institute at Columbia, and it was the death of Luigi Trastulli. But Alessandro Porcelli from the American University at Rome, I believe he was teaching at the time. Now, this was in the 1990s when I took this Oral History Institute at Columbia, but I was so happy to be in New York. But again, they interviewed townspeople in Italy about what happened to this worker. How did he die? And almost everybody had a different story.
Had a different story.
Yeah, because it was how they experienced it, what this man meant to them. And it led them to tell a different story. Now they weren't fabricating the story, that's how
Mm.
they experienced it. But Dr. Alessandro Portelli said it's not the song that matters, it's the singing. The fact that someone
Yes.
trusted the interviewer enough, to share their story with that person and trusted them to share it with the rest of the world accurately, just as they told it.
Yes.
So it's a valid memory for them. First person narratives. Again, they're talking about someone else's life, but it was
Yes.
their lives intersected with the other person's life. I always love that book, you know, and
I love that.
yeah, it's been a while. There's probably a more recent edition than the one that I read in the 1990s, but he invited me to come to Rome, and experience Italy and the American University there, and I never took him up on that offer. But he's the Toni Morrison Scholar. So
Yes, nice.
yes, yes. So all of that.
Listen, it's never too late to go to Rome.
Well, yeah, it's still there, huh? Yeah, maybe I'll do
Yeah,
that.
they still have flights that go there.
Hope I get to meet you soon. Your mother is amazing. I know you are too. So,
Well, you are amazing as well, and thank you so much for this time. I feel like I've been literally sipping coffee with my girlfriend. So thank you so much.
all right. Thank you so much. You take care and have a good night.
Thank you. You too.